and welcome to the ThinkMHK podcast presented by the Manhattan Area Chamber of Commerce. On this podcast, you will hear about a variety of local matters pertaining to the business community. You also hear from local business owners to hear their story and gain valuable business insights. Thanks for tuning in today. Welcome to a special ThinkMHK podcast. My guest for today is somebody that's normally one of my co-hosts, Daryn Soldan, our Director of Economic Development at the Manhattan Area Chamber. Hey, Daryn.
Hey, Jason. Interesting sitting on this side of the table today.
I know. That's, a little peek inside the inner workings of the ThinkMHK podcast. Normally, you are on this side of the table, and we have a guest sitting on the other side of the table with our producer, Dave Lewis. But today, you are the one under the microscope, and so you're sitting on the other side.
Here I am on the other side, ready to answer the hard-hitting questions.
All right. Well, so in all seriousness, we are here today to talk about a serious subject, and that is an update on the Scorpion Biological Services Project. And of course, we're in the last episode of season 2 of the ThinkMHK podcast, and we've had quite a bit of dialogue during this season about Scorpion. It was announced early in the process. We had several episodes where we discussed the inner workings of how that came to be, but we've recently come across a scenario where we're starting to get a lot of phone calls and people that are interested in updates and what's going on. And one of the things that I think you and I have discovered is the longer that we go on, and we knew this was going to happen probably to some degree, but we tend to see a little bit more information that, let's just to be fair or to maybe be as nice as possible, may not be completely accurate. And so I think we wanted to take the opportunity to discuss the project, maybe get an update on where we were in terms of size, but also maybe clarify some of the information around the project development. Give us a project description about the project and what's going on at the location there at Excel Road and US 24.
So Scorpion Biological Services plans a commercial scale production facility. So it's biomanufacturing is what will be going on there. That ultimately is the production of things like FDA-approved vaccines, other medicines derived from living cells, biological processes. So those are called biologics. So anytime you hear reference to vaccines or biologics, that's what's going to be produced there.
But unlike MBAF, there's not any live organisms or anything like that. That's been a question, right?
Yeah, it has been, and I think that's something to be very clear. This is not a research facility in the vein of NBAF. This is a biomanufacturing facility. You're not talking about bringing live pathogens in quantity like they're doing at NBAF and testing on animals or anything like that. This is purely vaccine and biologics production.
In fact, I've heard some of the individuals associated with the project say, if we have any live organisms in the plant, we're in trouble. We have to shut the plant down. We can't operate.
Yeah, their operation is more about keeping things out that could potentially contaminate the process than it is in bringing anything in. So it's a very clean process. Think about production in clean rooms, very controlled environment across a number of different factors, but the importance of clean, controlled environment is paramount to what they're going to be doing.
And they will be, or at least they're planning to create a number of jobs around this project as well, correct?
Absolutely. The project is incredibly impactful. When fully operational, talking about over a $650 million capital investment in building and equipment and everything associated with that, and then over 500 jobs, and not just any jobs, really good paying jobs, and over a $75,000 annual salary average. And so I think within our market, that's going to be very impactful. But also, as you look at a more broad economic standpoint, this is an industry that's growing significantly. Obviously, you've had a large amount of production capacity that was built out in response to COVID and generating COVID-19 vaccines. But across the world, development in biologics and then within the United States specifically, the return to domestic production and bringing that production back onshore in the United States is what's really driving a lot of this kind of development. And so it's an exciting time for our region, not just the impact of the project and the salaries and wages associated with those new jobs being created, but the fact that it's in an industry that's growing and has an incredibly bright and prosperous future ahead.
And of course, the 75,000 is well over 150% of our current average. But it's not a scenario where they're just coming in and saying, we're going to try to find 500 people. You and some other people on our economic development team are working pretty extensively with them on what they can do to develop their own pipeline. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, pipeline's going to be vitally important in all of this. The great news is that so many of the jobs that are associated with this type of a facility are ones that someone can go get technical training on, and whether it's changing a career or building upon an educational background they have, for example, a biology or a chemistry major that would have an opportunity to go work in an analytics lab type of setting or in a production management role. There's training you can get. So working closely with Manhattan Area Technical College, working closely with Kansas State University on developing the educational resources that will ultimately support that pipeline. And it really is, again, exciting from an economic development standpoint for our region, because this is a great opportunity. Projects like this are a great opportunity for us to retain talent. And talent's so important to our future. As we grow jobs, you've got to have the talent to fill them. And so whether it's a transitioning military member that Fort Riley is their last duty station in the United States Army, and they transition out and see this great opportunity, they enjoy living here. This is home when they transition, and they have a great opportunity to go into something where the salary is very competitive and where it's a field with a lot of opportunity professionally. They hopefully will be able to do that by going through some training programs at one of our academic institutions and get into a great professional career. And so whether, again, Fort Riley, soldiers transitioning, family members, Kansas State University graduates, or graduates from other universities across the state and throughout the region, creating that pipeline, retaining that talent in this area, and giving them great professional opportunities is going to be a really long-term benefit of this project.
And while you never know for sure what happens, these are the kind of projects where you create jobs and you create training programs and then recruiting efforts to get people into those programs, where you actually see more projects tend to follow up, and you build clusters in these different kinds of industries.
Absolutely. Long-term, a cluster of these types of companies, and not just on the private sector side. You look at work that's going on at the university. You look at work that's going on at NBAF. There is some, from a skill set standpoint, there's some overlap there. The more of a cluster we can establish here with the resources and the pipeline to support it, the better off all of those folks that are doing hiring. It'll become easier for them to attract talent here, retain talent here.
One other issue on the hiring side that I've heard is this idea of Scorpion's going to come in and immediately hire 500 people. That's actually going to be over a period of time, correct? They're not anticipating coming in, having a career fair and saying, we're going to hire 500 people next week. It's a longer process than that, right?
It is. You're talking about, obviously it's a significant construction process to begin with, but then there's a multi-year job ramp associated with the hiring. So yes, it's the impact will not be immediate on the local labor force and the employment market. And obviously it'll take some time as well to build out some of the pipeline of talent that Scorpion and other employers that are looking for that kind of talent will be hiring.
So Daryn, as we've talked about before, this was a highly competitive project. It was a 27-state initial search. Eventually it got down to 2 or 3 states, and through that process, we were always the only community in Kansas that had made the initial cut. But talk a little bit about how incentives are applied, why we include incentives, and then maybe walk through the incentive package that was put forward on the Scorpion project.
From an incentive standpoint, there's a couple different components. One is the competitiveness. Obviously, economic development's a very competitive business, and communities, states, regions compete against each other for these highly impactful projects. There's a reason they do that. The long-term benefit of projects like this are not just measured in the millions or hundreds of millions, but are literally in the billions of dollars over the next 20 years or so. And the economic impact analysis that we've had a third party do so far on this project bears that out. So the long-term benefit to the city, the county, the region, and the state is immense. And so it creates a very competitive market to get these types of projects. Within that competition, there are some pretty regularly used tools. Tax abatements are one of them. Some states use tax increment financing. In our case here, a tax abatement is part of the incentive package. And so what that's doing is abating property tax over a period of 10 years. The good news on that is that currently the property where that is being built generates very little property tax. It's taxed as agricultural land, and its valuation is very low as such. Whereas upon completion, depending on the valuation, you're talking about millions and millions of dollars of annual property tax revenue generation. And that's not just to the city, but also to the county as well and the school district. So that impact will be significant once that property is fully on the tax rolls. Another component of economic development incentives that is frequently utilized in projects like this, and we utilized it in this case, is the city of Manhattan has economic development fund dollars that are generated through sales tax that are set aside to support job creation and an investment in the community for these types of projects. And so there is a forgivable loan that has been utilized similarly in past projects where there's the job creation component of the project, in this case, over 500 new jobs, again, with that average salary of over $75,000. And that company will get credit for those jobs as they're created, and there's a financial incentive on the front end for bringing those jobs to the community. Again, the economic impact long term of those, you're talking when fully operational, approximately $37 million a year in payroll that's not currently existing in our region, that's going into the local economy. And you extrapolate that out, those are on the approximately 500 direct jobs. You extrapolate that out to include the 700 indirect jobs that are anticipated from this project. Add that all up, you're talking about over $1 billion. In fact, about $1.3 billion just in salaries and wages going into our local economy over the next 20 years. So as you can see, that has the potential to be significantly impactful and something that it's the investment on the front end. That's why the city has the economic development fund dollars for incentives, and we were able to be competitive on this project.
And we also had Pottawatomie County that participated this year, really in a significant way for the first time that we're aware of, at least in an economic development project.
They did, and the commitment there, and so they've passed a resolution of intent to consider economic development incentives for this project as well. I mentioned that when fully operational, the property tax revenue generation is well into the multi-millions of dollars per year just to the county. And so appreciate the Pottawatomie County Commission's forward-thinking views on that inclusion of economic development incentives in Pottawatomie County Economic Development, as well as county administration. There's a significant amount of work that goes into the details associated with these types of projects, everything from the recruitment piece to currently there's a lot of work going into the development agreements and the public processes that are associated with approving those incentives, not to mention the work being done by a number of folks associated with site improvements and everything else that has to happen to ultimately prepare the site, the finances, and the local environment for the project to be built.
So let's talk about, so Pottawatomie County committed $5 million, and they'll be taking that up at some point. Maybe have by the time somebody listens to this, so hopefully that's a positive. But let's talk a little bit about the property tax impact. So the first year that this is off the tax rolls, Pottawatomie County has committed $5 million to the project. The first year that this is on the tax rolls, the estimated property tax paid by Scorpion or the developer who owns the building will be how much that will go to Pottawatomie County? In excess of $4 million. Basically, in 1 year, they will make back what they committed to the project. And then going forward, so if you're looking at this in a 20-year window, 10 more years, that's $40 million.
Correct. So
$5 million to get 40 in a 20-year period seems like a fairly good rate of return for a county. But also, and let's talk about this for a minute, Pottawatomie County is unique in the fact that, first of all, they have one of the lowest property tax rates in the state of Kansas, which is incredible, and we applaud them for that. But a lot of the reason for that is because they have a huge taxpayer located in the eastern part of the county. Talk a little bit about Jeffrey Energy Center and what impact that is on the Pottawatomie County budget.
Jeffrey Energy Center, Evergy operates that facility. If you look at the breakdown of Pottawatomie County's ad valorem property tax on an annual basis, the property tax generated off that Jeffrey Energy Center property is over 51% of the total property tax collected in the entire county. which, to your point, allows the county to do some things from a budget standpoint and otherwise from a mill levy and taxing standpoint that allows property tax to stay low. And we've seen a significant amount of residential development into Pottawatomie County, and that's obviously something that's helped drive a fair amount of that growth. At the same time, there's some new legislation that came along last year that probably expedited the ability of coal plants like Jeffries to the folks that operate those to take some of those offline. And so, there was an announcement last year that by 2030, one of the 3 units at Jeffries would be coming offline. And so, you start to look down the road a little bit. There is definitely some concern that as those types of properties are valued and they are generating less energy, fewer units, fully functional, that valuation of that property will probably go down. When that goes down, obviously the property tax revenue generated off of it goes down as well, assuming the mill levy stays the same. So, that raises a question as we look forward the next 5-10 years of where will Pottawatomie County make up that potentially lost revenue, generating additional valuation within the county, which projects like especially commercial and industrial projects, because the way that the state of Kansas applies valuation to where it's at a significantly higher percentage, 2 to 3 times more on commercial industrial property than it is on residential property. You really need to have residential and industrial growth to generate more property tax revenue for the county. And so we believe that this type of a project will help drive that and will help make up a portion, if not more, of that difference, but also allow for the infrastructure and the other expenses that come along with the residential growth out into the county that's currently going on, and we anticipate will continue to go on for a long time into the future.
So to be clear, and if you are someone who is interested in tax policy and the math on these things, Jeffrey Energy Center will be decommissioning part of its plant. Jeffrey Energy Center will be asking for reduction in property taxes. So in order to maintain services, there will be an amount of money, probably in the millions, that the existing Pottawatomie County residents and businesses will have to pay to overcome that deficit, unless they can add valuation in an amount that can overcome that deficit. If you look at the plans that the city of Manhattan was doing as they were planning their growth and they looked at the Blue Township area, Scorpion by itself is about a 25-year projection. So in order to get as much investment as we're getting in the Scorpion project, the estimates based on previous history were it was going to take 25 years to get that. So this is a scenario where Jeffrey Energy Center will be reducing at the time Scorpion is coming online. They can easily fill that gap that's necessary where you see the reduction. And in essence, there won't be a negative impact in theory on the existing Pottawatomie County taxpayers.
That's correct. Very, very succinctly said.
I don't know about succinctly, but it works for my simple mind. The other issue is sales tax. And we talk about the ROI. You mentioned briefly the amount of the new income that's going to be generated. Now that's new dollars into the community. So $35 million annually that's brought into the community that will be spent in many cases locally. But in terms of sales tax, Pottawatomie County has a sales tax component, and I believe close to 50% of it too is generated in Blue Township, correct?
Correct. Nearly 50% of I think the number is about 45% of the sales tax generated in Pottawatomie County that goes back to the county is generated in the part of the county that actually is within the city limits of Manhattan there. So the very southwestern part of Pottawatomie County. I think that's important for a couple reasons. One, obviously, that is a major retail hub, not just within Pottawatomie County or Manhattan, but within the region. That's an area that pulls, all you have to do is drive through some of those parking lots, the restaurants and the retail stores over there and look at the license plates and see all the different counties that those folks are coming from. So that's significant. The fact that we know that as new residents move to the area. We know that as folks are here during the construction period for the project, and they've got to go places to eat, and they've got to go places to buy things, and they have to go places to recreate. We know that a lot of that is going to be happening within Pottawatomie County. Maybe happening in the city limits of Manhattan, but it's happening in many cases within Pottawatomie County. Why that's so beneficial to the county is that the county has a 1 cent sales tax that ultimately goes back to the county, and then each of the municipalities within the county see a percentage of that based upon population and property valuation. So at the end of the day, whether you're in Wamego or St. Mary's or Nega, Westmoreland, St. George, and any of the municipalities in the county are seeing benefit from that every single year. And that's a very unique situation. It's not something that you see in a lot of counties that have as much rural area as Pottawatomie County does. But that ability to leverage all of that retail activity that goes on there along that Highway 24 corridor going out the east side of Manhattan is very valuable to the county. And of course, we would expect that those numbers will only get boosted when you start talking about that additional $37 million a year in payroll, and the impacts of the construction period, and just the additional activity that will go on because of this project.
Yeah, so let's talk about that for a minute. So you're a former chamber exec in Wamego. So this is something that you have intimate knowledge of, not just from working for us, but your history. So I go eat at Cox Bros, which is one of my favorite eating establishments, and that's in Pot County. So I buy a baked potato with barbecue on it and spend $10. It's never $10, by the way, but let's just say for sake of math, it's $10.
Good, because I don't want to do the difficult math on it.
So there's sales tax on that baked potato of about 10 cents, I guess, if I'm doing my math correctly. There's a percentage of that goes to St. Mary's. There's a percentage of that goes to Wamego. There's a percentage of that goes to Westmoreland, because the county splits its sales tax, and that's a state statute, correct? That requires them to do that. So what would be the annual amount of sales tax that a community like Wamego gets off of the sales tax, that the Pottawatomie County sales tax?
You're talking about around $1 million in sales tax annually that's going to the.
And to be fair, some of that's generated in Wamego.
Correct. Absolutely.
But half of that almost is generated in Manhattan.
Absolutely. Yep. And within the city limits of Manhattan, again, you take that area there that on the very east side of Manhattan, where there's a lot of retail, there's car dealerships, there's restaurants, there's some large box retailers, there's some locally owned retailers, but yeah, there's a significant regional hub of retail, and the entire county in Pottawatomie County benefits from that.
So you would assume you drop $35 million new dollars into Pottawatomie County, that some of that's going to get spent in Pottawatomie County. So it's not just Blue Township, Manhattan, or even St. George or Westmoreland or Wamego that benefits. It's the entire county is going to see some financial return on this project.
Absolutely. So whether it's the portion of property tax that's going directly to the county general fund as a part of their property tax collection. The increased valuation off of this facility will drive that, or it's the additional people that will drive sales tax, both during construction and also as the facility comes online and becomes fully operational. In both cases, the entirety of the county will see benefit from the project, significant benefit.
Of course, Manhattan will too, and that brings me to my next point, and that's annexation. This was a site that was not in the city limits, but the project required that it be annexed into the city limits. And so we went through an island annexation process, and congratulations. I know you worked really hard to make sure that happened. But talk about why it had to be annexed. And is that part of a larger strategy, or is that, at least in your mind for right now, kind of a standalone decision?
Yeah, I think for the time being, a standalone decision, it was essential for this project. And at the end of the day, and that's a question we've gotten a lot from a lot of different folks, and it's really a pretty simple answer. A multi-$100 million investment in a facility, you're producing something in that facility that goes out that's worth multi-hundreds of millions of dollars. Obviously, insurance and security play a major role in the decisions made and those that are associated with that kind of investment. And so, ultimately, at the end of the day, the folks that are insuring that property and insuring that facility, need it to have city services. So you start thinking about things like city fire and the fire rating that the city brings with it. Think about police services and what that entails. And so ultimately, the annexation component of this was absolutely necessary to make that site functional for the company and make that site functional for the kind of work that they're going to do there. All that was annexed through that process was the parcel that the project will be built on, and the adjoining road right of way on Excel Road. And so the city will take over maintenance of Excel Road there from Highway 24 up to the north edge of the site,
which saves Pottawatomie County money.
Which does, and obviously the city will have to play a very significant role in improvements made along that stretch of road too, which we'll talk a little bit about, I assume, as we talk about some traffic. But so at the end of the day, that annexation was done as an island annexation, simply the parcel that the project will be built on. And obviously there've been additional conversations at the city level. There was a kind of a cost benefit analysis that was done as it relates to annexation over in that part of the county going east out of the city of Manhattan. But as it relates to what was currently done, it was done for the project and just the parcel that will be built on.
And we've looked at this a lot lately in terms of the property tax and the distribution between the different governing entities. And we're unique in Manhattan and Raleigh County with the RCPD arrangement. And so RCPD gets most of the city's property tax allocation. In fact, the city itself relies more on sales tax than property tax. And so the idea of annexing it, there'll be some property tax benefit, but most of the benefit the city's going to get from Scorpion will be in sales tax. And so there's no grand, in your opinion, in my opinion, there's no grand plan to go out and annex a lot of that property because at the end of the day, the city doesn't necessarily reap enormous amount of revenue, particularly as it relates to then netting out services from annexing a lot of property anyway. Yeah,
and that number's somewhere in the 13 cents on a dollar or 13% range as far as the amount of every dollar of property tax revenue.
Oh, I think it's actually 11. It's even less than that.
Less than that. Yeah. So that actually goes to the city general fund. I think another thing to clarify, because this is a question that's come up as it relates to property tax, is that by annexing this, the city is not stealing a significant sum of property tax from the county. I think that's one thing to be very clear on. Obviously, there is a portion of the property tax, which I think is approximately $4,000 a year right now, that's being generated off that particular parcel, that goes to things like the rural water district and the township fire and those sort of things, the county road and bridge fund. But you're talking about a very small amount compared to $4 million worth of property tax generation to the county down the road when that property is fully on the tax rolls, and so fully developed and on the tax rolls. So, just to clarify, this isn't having any direct impact on if you live in a house in Blue Township in Pottawatomie County. This is not impacting your mill levy or your tax rate, what you pay in property taxes, and it's not creating a situation where the county is seeing any shortfall in their property tax collection that has to be made up somewhere else.
And so real quick before we, I think, move on from the economic impact, there'll obviously be a lot of impact during construction and some things that most people or a lot of people may not think about. We do, obviously, because we also do tourism at the chamber, but you'll have a lot of construction workers. You'll have a lot of hotel room nights. Construction period right now is estimated 3 to 5 years, right? Depending
Correct.
on how they advance forward. So any other areas where maybe we're going to see impact that we haven't talked about?
Yeah, I think there's going to be a direct impact to the immediate area. Obviously, you start thinking about construction work, and if you've got a lunch break and you've got a defined time that you can take that lunch break or a period during your shift, you're probably not going to go too terrible far. And so, there's this, again, I think very beneficial to the county. There's a significant amount of opportunities out in that area to eat, and I would imagine that those places will see a fair amount of business. You mentioned things like room nights, right? That matters. You're going to have. We saw this with NBAF during a construction process. There's enough folks that come in for a period of time and are regulars that they have to be housed someplace within the community. Some of that ends up being in our hotels, extended stay hotels, and so there's some collection of transient guest tax off of that ultimately benefits the city as well. So yeah, that impact goes more than it's more than, think about it in terms of because you've got some very specialized work that's going on too. You've got some folks that are coming from outside the area. Obviously, we think that there'll be a significant number of local contractors and service providers that are used ultimately for the work as well. But you're going to be bringing in, like NBAF, not to the scale necessarily of NBAF numbers wise, but you're going to be bringing in some very specialized folks. They're going to be here for a period of time from outside the community, and that's going to provide an immediate bump economically here.
People smarter than me have figured these formulas out, but the estimate is about 1,000 new residents in relation to this project as well, correct?
Total, yeah. So just to run through some of those numbers really quick, so we're just over 500 new employees when fully operational, about another 700 indirect jobs. So you start thinking about when you add 500 people to the market, and making that wage, what other growth in retail and service and everything else does that support related to that, specifically to that project? Again, that totals out to over $1 billion worth of impact just from salaries and wages over the next 20 years. But then taking that even a step further, over 1,000 new residents, you start talking about a significant number of kids in the area school districts that adds, over 100 new homes would be built just specifically related to the new folks coming in because of this project. So it's going to drive a number of economic impacts, but those aren't always direct. Some of that we'll see on down the road. So whether you're building houses or you're providing a service or any number of things, you can see some benefit from this project.
Let's talk a little bit about maybe some perceived negative impacts. And I'm not going to say that there aren't some, but maybe not quite as much as what we're hearing. And I don't want to make light of any of these things because there are people who care about it and are passionate about it, and we want to make sure that people are safe and can drive to work safely and get home safely. But there are a lot of people now, Daryn, who think that you're trying to make their commute time significantly harder than it used to be, that for whatever reason you've decided you want to make sure that US 24 is full of traffic 24 hours a day. How would you respond to that?
Yeah, I would just say that ultimately a project like this, especially if you start looking and comparing to other potential development. I think that Highway 24 corridor, just look at the last 20, 30 years as it continues to move east, that corridor will continue to develop. It is prime real estate for development. Commercial, industrial, obviously housing within that corridor, all of the above. This particular project is probably about as high economic return with as low impact as we can find. Obviously, compare it to if you compare it to an industrial manufacturing scenario where there are a significant number of inputs being brought in on large trucks on a daily basis and finished product being shipped out on large trucks, that's just not what this is.
So let's talk about that for a minute, because I don't want to lose sight of that, because sometimes we tend to talk in technical terms that. I want to be very blunt on this. So we're talking about making vaccines. Now, vaccines in by itself is a very small product.
Correct.
So what I heard the gentleman say at one of the community sessions was you can basically send 30 days worth of vaccines out in a 10-liter bottle. Is that the same thing you heard?
Correct. Yeah. Yeah.
So basically a 10-liter bottle fits in the back of a truck.
Yep.
So if you look at a lot of our manufacturers, and by the way, are great manufacturers, right? Manco Windows ships windows, and Florence ships cluster boxes and those kind of things. Those products are fairly substantial.
Correct.
And so when you're shipping those on a semi truck.
Think about buckets leaving Wamego from Caterpillar, right? Massive buckets, you might fit 3 or 4 of those on the back of a flatbed semi.
Correct. So in this scenario, you're maybe in a van, I guess, probably some specialized van that can transport, because as you said, you have a $200 million worth of vaccine in a 10-liter bottle, you don't want that broken.
No,
I'm sure that there's some way that they're not putting that on the back of a flatbed and shipping it down the road. There's a vehicle that they're shipping that in that's probably much smaller than a semi, many fewer actual trips than you would otherwise. And so that's one area. Then the inputs, most of the input in a vaccine is actually water. And water is not shipped in, water is
piped in.
And so you don't have the inputs going in as well. So when we say there aren't going to be a lot of trucks, there aren't going to be a lot of trucks. The trucks will be a little bit of this, a little bit of that, but what do you think? I heard you say the other day, maybe 5 a week.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fair to say a handful, right? And at the end of the day, then you're also, again, I compare it to, a heavy industrial type of facility where everything comes in on a semi truck, everything goes out on a semi truck, and there's waste product as well, right?
And it's multiple a day,
and it's multiple a day, or even a retail setting, right? I mean, think about a large retail center. I mean, you've got again double digits probably worth of trucks a day. You've got materials. You've got product coming in and going out. You've got a lot of waste that has to be stored someplace on site till it's hauled away, and not to mention the other traffic then associated with that. So it's important to point out, again, the amount of traffic coming and going to a facility like this, even with 500 employees when fully operational, that's most likely across 3 shifts. So that's not 500 people all at once. Typically, these facilities, and you look at other facilities within the region. Again, you look at there's a Pfizer facility in McPherson. There's facilities both in human health and animal health doing things in Lincoln, in Omaha, in Kansas, in suburban Kansas City. Oftentimes those shifts are not aligned with busy traffic time. So you're not ending a shift and starting a new shift at 8 a.m. That's happening at 6 a.m., right? And getting off at 2 or 3 in the afternoon. And so the amount of traffic resulting from people coming and going employee wise is not nearly as significant as it maybe could be made out to be. And then ultimately there's just not a lot of coming and going. You don't have like a retail situation where you might have 15,000 people a day or vehicles a day targeting that specific place to go because it's a retail center. In fact, the estimates are just in the hundreds of total outside visitors a year.
Hundreds of visitors a year. So what's that? 3 a day, I guess. I mean, you may have where you have more. And then you talked about 500 employees who are in multiple shifts. So you may have 3 production shifts, then you may have an office shift, then you may have a cleanup shift. So in theory, you could have people coming and going at multiple times a day. So you don't even have more than 100 to 150 cars at any given moment.
And all coming and going to a facility that is fully fenced, fully secured. You're not gonna seek this out as a destination that you're going to. You're going there for a reason, and you have to have clearance to get in.
And one other thing I think to point out, most people are commuting. Their commuting pattern is to Manhattan in the morning, away from Manhattan in the evening. In this scenario, the commuting pattern will be away from Manhattan in the morning to Manhattan in the evening. And so you even are having less of an impact on congestion.
Correct. Yeah, it is ultimately the traffic studies that have been done and had to be done as part of the annexation, rezoning, replatting process and are required in these types of projects, have shown that there is not based on the operation and based on the number of people, that there is not a significant impact resulting directly from the project on those local and regional traffic patterns. Now, that's not to say that there aren't improvements that will ultimately come from this as it relates to traffic infrastructure in that area. I think that it's the Excel Road Highway 24 intersection, much like has been done at Green Valley Road, will probably need some traffic control. So you're talking about things like a traffic light, turn lanes going in multiple directions to help with that flow. But that's actually something based off of past KDOT numbers and traffic studies that intersection should have right now. And so ultimately this project is actually probably fast tracking that, and we'll get it done sooner than it may have gotten done otherwise, despite the fact that the numbers show that need currently exists.
Yeah, not necessarily because the need is increased, but because maybe there's more visibility.
Absolutely.
And there may be funding available at the state level that otherwise might not have been available.
Absolutely. Yep.
So in essence, the impact based on the study is basically zero, right? I mean, there's no significant impacts in terms of traffic at that intersection because of this project. And in fact, there are a number of other, you could put a strip mall there, you could put a housing addition there, which might include apartments. I mean, there's a number of other developments where the traffic situation's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times as bad, and without the kind of property tax return you're going to get here.
And I think that goes back to that point when we first started talking about this, that at the end of the day, this is probably about as high economic return for as low of impact as we could hope to have in a development of this size and scale in that location. And I think that's an incredibly important thing for people to remember, that, the reality of the number of vehicles coming and going, because driven by employees, the reality of the number of trucks in and out of that facility, or the lack of significant number of trucks in and out of the facility, the fact that it's a controlled facility and secured facility, creates a situation where the overall impact when operational from vehicles is not creating a safety hazard. And in fact, the situation when the improvements are made will probably be better than they are current day, after you have a signalized intersection and additional turn lanes added.
And just an example of that is Walmart. And just if you're ever interested, sit outside of Walmart. If you have a whole lot of time on your hands, sit outside of Walmart and watch the number of cars and trucks that come in and out, and you get a feel. I know 500 sounds like a lot, but you get a feel of what that's like. And from a property tax standpoint, Walmart's paying about 3 to 5% of what Scorpion is estimated they're going to pay when it comes back on the tax roll. So just an incredible amount of impact, or financial impact, positive for the county. And so something to think about. The last item that we want to talk about, because it's kind of visible, that intersection. And I know in the community meeting, you were asked if you knew what the nickname of that area was, and I think I don't remember what.
Swamp Angel.
Swamp Angel.
So, I spent my fair share of time there as a young person.
And so there is water that has stood in that area, correct? And so how does this impact that? How does this project impact the potential water that's in that area? And what are you working on to separate from the project that might have a positive impact on that?
Yeah. Well, first off, I think it's important to remember that our city of Manhattan, Pottawatomie County, there are codes and design standards in place to ensure public safety and ensure that development does not create a situation that puts the public unduly at risk, right? And so all of those rules are being followed, plus on a project like this. Obviously, the folks involved in this understand this is a high visibility project and in a high visibility location. The property owners there that own that area and points to the north and east already prior to the Scorpion project had made some water runoff detention improvements, including a regional detention facility. And then all of the engineering specific to the Scorpion project will ensure, and the engineering numbers support this, ensure that it's not creating additional runoff from what currently exists on that site. In fact, those conditions will be better. They will be, not only is there regional detention up on the north of the Scorpion site, but if you drive by there now, you can already see it where the fill work has been done. The southern edge of that site, down closest to Highway 24, will actually be a stormwater runoff detention and purification or water quality improvement facility. So that water has to be slowed down. Some of the sediment drops out of it before it moves on downstream. And so, as it relates again specifically to the project, specifically to the conditions on that site after this development and the other improvements that have been done in that area, stormwater runoff will probably be in a better spot than it was prior to those improvements being made.
To be clear, you will still drive by there and see water.
Absolutely.
And that means it's working, not that it's not working. Correct?
Absolutely. Part of stormwater management involves slowing water down. Obviously, fast-moving water picks up more sediment, does more damage along its way, and creates more issues downstream. And so part of that is slowing down water. That's what detention does. And there are also other things downstream that create a situation where, if you go further east, north of Highway 24, where where there sometimes is water standing. That's been improved significantly over where it was 5-6 years ago because of some of the improvements made along Excel Road and along Highway 24 to the ditches there. But there still is a bit of a pinch point underneath the railroad tracks there further east of the Scorpion site that creates a situation where sometimes there is standing water there along the north side of Highway 24 in some of those agricultural fields.
And there's a problem. There is a legitimate problem with some of the, I remember the box culvert that goes underneath the Union Pacific Railroad. My understanding in years of this business is you cannot do anything with a railroad without the railroad's permission. And so you have been in contact with Union Pacific and are working with them on a potential solution for that too, correct?
Yes. And I think it's important to remember that there are a lot of parties involved. And so you've got the Kansas Department of Transportation, you've got the city, you've got the county, you've got Union Pacific, you've got the other state departments that play a role in that communication. And I want to give a lot of kudos to both the city of Manhattan and Potawatomi County because, there's a lot of additional work that goes into a project like this and a lot of additional communication with all of those other entities that have some kind of oversight or governance over what's going on. And they have been engaged. Those conversations happen, at the professional, the engineer to engineer level, but also at the upper levels of management. And so I think everybody is rowing in the same direction here. Obviously, there's always going to be issues as development continues. There's always going to be issues that have nothing to do with the project or have been mitigated as it relates to the project. And I think that's one important thing to remember is that every effort has been taken to A, follow guidelines and regulations, but B, ensure that the conditions that are created because of the project in many cases will actually be an improvement over current conditions.
And it's not any company's responsibility to fix a problem that's already been there. It's their obligation to make sure they don't cause any further problems.
Absolutely. And the engineering that's been done on this project is ensuring that that's the case.
And in terms of, obviously some people worry about as you're making vaccines that there could be something you're potentially putting back into the sewer system. There's an enormous amount of pre-treat that goes on to what they're doing before it goes back because they want to make sure that that's safe.
Yep, absolutely. And again, you don't have to look far in this community. Look at the kind of work that NBAF is doing and the requirements there. Obviously, this is at a much lesser level when it comes to what's going into or coming out of there and having to be purified before it goes into the system. And so, all of those things again are being designed, engineered, and meeting or exceeding the code or the regulatory levels.
So one last item before we depart here, and I know we've been a little longer today than normal, but I think it's important to make sure that we touch on all these issues. Alternate route, or some people may know the Juniata Bridge, or there's a number of different ideas that have been floated out there. But this could be something that could potentially spur the alternate route study, correct?
Yes, as development continues to move east out of Manhattan along that Highway 24 corridor, you just look at a map and see that that's obviously a key point of flow both in and out of Manhattan on the east side, and the currently existing alternative routes are reasonably long and in many cases gravel county road. And so, as you look at what happens if there's a traffic accident, what happens if there's flooding, which has happened along that corridor a couple times going back over the last 75 years.
You had the number. What was since 93, 7 days? Is that right?
Approximately, I think. Yeah. So the highway was closed in 93. And obviously there was some concern here 4 or 5 years ago when we had that really wet summer, and some concern that if water was let out of Tuttle Creek through the spillway, that you'd have similar conditions. And so, there is obviously concern that as that area continues to develop and additional traffic, and you have people getting to work and getting home and everything else, that providing some type of an alternative route would be beneficial, not just to folks that live out there, but folks that employ people that live out there and businesses out there. And I think that that's something that we're obviously supportive of exploring and want to better understand what kind of options exist there and what the what the costs and benefits of those options are, and it's an issue that obviously has been raised and been discussed for a number of years around here, but one that as development continues out there, we think that that will ultimately help drive that conversation, and that sort of infrastructure improvements often follow development, but it's pretty hard to get them out in front of development.
Yeah, that's a great point. So obviously the alternate route is something we've talked about since I've been here, and I've been here a little over 3 years, but I know that has been on the docket for even longer than that. And I think we're very interested in having that dialogue, and hopefully we can use a project like this to spur that. So Daryn, thank you for being with us. I know these are hard questions to go through, but you handle them like a champ. We would encourage people, if they're interested, to contact the Chamber if you have specific questions. We're also going to set up an informational page off the GMEP, our Greater Manhattan Economic Partnership website. Remind me, that's greatermanhattan.org. Is that correct?
Correct.
So you can go to greatermanhattan.org, and we will have some information on there. If there's something from this you'd like to refresh your memory on, we'll have all that on that site too. But give us a call if you are interested in any other aspects of this project or any project, and we'll be happy to answer them. So thank you all for being with us today, and we'll look forward to season 3 when we kick that off in a couple of months. This has been a fun season. Dave, you might hop on for a second. I know this is something that we did a summary last year. Of course, we didn't have a 1-hour podcast on as part of that, but a lot of Scorpion talk this year. Anything sticks out of your mind in terms of this season? I know I can tell you my favorite, but I'll let you go first.
I just think that, we're just on the precipice of something just even greater than what we had thought about, when NBAF was first being talked about, and now it's becoming a reality this year. And then you have, a project like Scorpion, and we know that there's going to be more, and it's just really exciting. For those that maybe they found this episode and they wanted to learn more about Scorpion and they haven't had a chance to listen to the past episodes. 2 of my favorite episodes this season. Do you know what they are off the top of your head? The one probably that we had with Daryn and Jack Alston. It was a good episode, but it didn't have anything to do with Scorpion. Mine didn't have anything to do with Scorpion. I really enjoyed the visit with Mike Madsen. That was good. That was one of I'm a big Mike Madsen fan.
Aren't we all?
Another one that I thought was very enlightening and tackled some challenges was the DEI episode.
That was a good one. Yeah.
And, there was some uncomfortable moments in there where we talked about a lot of things, but it's really healthy to have that discussion and see how the Chamber is engaging with its membership and with the community in order to try to conquer some of these challenges.
So I want to talk about that one for a minute. And this is another one where give a little peek behind the curtain of podcasting and how things work. But I think it taught us a valuable lesson. So we had some initial dialogue about DEI, and we said, let's have a podcast about it. And we had Summerot Dirks, who's our chair, and we had Lisa Sicily, and we had Doug Barrett, who is very active now in the Chamber. And the first one was we did the episode. It was very tough. What we discovered in the episode is we had not been talking to each other. And so we sat down right after that episode and we walked through a couple of things that Doug had an impression of something that the Chamber was doing. And we had some impressions of some things that we thought were moving in a positive direction, that were moving in a positive direction. We sat down, we worked all those things out. We came to a much better place to the point we said, hey, let's go back and re-record that. Because I think now that we've sort of understand where we are and that we are making progress. Let's talk about that. And everybody was in on that. And so I would encourage people, this is a topic that is really uncomfortable, but it's one that is really necessary. And that was the moment when I went, we've got to have these uncomfortable conversations or we don't advance. And so the podcast actually got us way further along than we would have been otherwise. My 2 favorite episodes, La Butler, which was the first episode of this season, one of my favorite episodes. Of course, for those that don't know,
he's a hero to this community and to me personally.
The Chamber president for nearly 20 years and was my predecessor. And then C. Clyde Jones, who is our oldest living Chamber chair. He was the chair, I believe, in 1965.
Is he still a member?
Oh, yeah.
He's probably the oldest living member as well.
As an individual, correct. We have some businesses we have one business who's been a member longer. I'm not sure exactly. We had like a loose association before we were actually an official organization.
Sure.
So like Commerce Bank, I think, has actually been a member longer than we've been a chamber.
Right.
But no,
not under that name,
but as an individual, yes. He's our longest serving member. And again, one of my heroes and somebody that I look up to. But great season, Dave. We appreciate all the hard work that you put in on this and at the Ad Astrocast studios. And I would encourage people, if you're interested in podcasting, give Dave a call. He is an expert and does a great job.
Well, and also give a shout out to our producer, who takes a lot of initiative in making sure that everybody sounds good and things get cleaned up. And, without that editing process, I sub all that out. That's not necessarily really high up in my list of capabilities. So, I've got 3 editors, and they're all very helpful, and allows me to do more work. And I'm certainly appreciative of the chamber supporting this little fledgling of a business model that there is no business model for, and it's been enlightening for me, and I certainly hope that it's been beneficial for the chamber and your members.
Well, it has, and of course, we appreciate your location as well. It's most people don't know it's next door to.
It's like a 40-yard sprint in the rain.
Very easy. One person I also want to recognize who doesn't get a lot of recognition, but is in every episode behind the scenes, and that's Kara Ray.
We haven't gotten her in front of a microphone yet.
That's going to happen next season. We're going to get her on here.
Did you get her to say yes to that?
I don't have to get her to say yes.
Okay.
We can assign. I guess in theory she could quit, but we hope that wouldn't happen.
That would be bad.
We probably wouldn't push it that far.
But it's a real challenge to negotiate schedules with all the guests, and everybody's busy. You guys are busy. And trying coordinating the hosts and the co-host and the guests, and my studio, and that there's a lot to trying to figure out how to get everybody in on the show.
Well, again, a peek behind the curtains. Other than you and me, Kara is the only person that's here for every episode.
That's true.
Appreciate her. All right, Dave, thank you for all you do for us. Daryn, thanks for joining us today for this conversation, and we will see everybody in a couple of months when we start season 3. Thanks for listening to this episode of ThinkMHK, a podcast produced by the Manhattan Area Chamber of Commerce. If you enjoyed the ThinkMHK podcast, we'd love for you to subscribe and share it out on your social media channels. Feel free to reach out to us on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram at the Manhattan Area Chamber of Commerce.